Grew up swimming on Cold Creek.
All right. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me now? I must ask. It was still no sound? Sound now? Sound now? Can you guys hear me now? All right. Thank you, Mark. This is a prime example of my life. I had this really awesome opening sequence with a movie, and for some reason I had the sign into a chat thing so I could view the chat, and it just all everything disappeared and it took away my audio source. But welcome to a very special event. This morning, as I've mentioned quite a few times recently, out of all the things that I used to be able to use as a salve to be in the now, the one thing that I have left is that can get me to that state easily, is teaching. And so this morning I got to teach my German bone tools students, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm actually, speaking of that, so the classes I have up on my schedule now are I'm going to be adding a few more. And so there's a couple reasons for this broadcast tonight. I had a long conversation with a good friend recently, and I was telling him my story, and going over this and going over that, and going over this, and he said, "What's the one thing what's the one common thread throughout all this?" And I said, "Me." And he goes, "Well, there you go. There's your answer." And yeah, I've made my fair share of mistakes. I don't need to rehash them because that's in the past. Um, However, the past affects the present, and it's some of the stuff, like I said, John Hughes, if you're watching this, I am preparing the best dark comedy screenplay of all time. But, and I say this all the time, all any of us can be expected to do is the best we can at that moment in space and time with the tools, resources, and information available to us. And every move I've made since going out on my own has been based on that, you know. Uh, um, and it wasn't until just the other day, after a very dear friend of mine from high school, it was before my Wednesday monthly live stream. Anyway, I popped on the Facebook one more time just before the broadcast, and I found out that one of my dear friends from high school passed on. And I just dropped. It was like somebody let go of the marionette strings, and I fell to the floor, and I was sobbing. And I was so sad on so many levels. Sad because her husband died the year before of an overdose, just like she did. And they left behind a 3 year old little girl who her sister and another good friend of mine, Jenny, will end up raising. And I think that had she had the tools that I had, and people like Bill Kaiser, guy who saved my life and plugged me back into nature, had she had those tools, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And then I think about how if all my plans had gone according to, maybe, I would have paid attention to social media a little bit more and caught on to the signs that there was something going on and reached out to her. But instead, I was busy beating my head against the wall, um, being ran all over the place, and just wondering why I kept, coming up against these failures. And like I said, ultimately only I'm responsible. And then at some point, my father decides to take his final walk, uh, and there's not a second of the day that goes by that I do not think about him. All over my room are images such as this. Oops, sorry for the glare. I got them all around me. And I am so thankful to that man. I'm thankful for him, and I curse him at the same time at other points. But my God, talk about a teacher, an educator, somebody whose lessons just keep on giving. That's one of the things I've enjoyed most about the T3 Reads TBJR is that uh, a lot of the chapters are things I haven't read in over a decade, and viewing them through the lens of 15 more years of life experience, you can glean a whole new set of wisdom from them. And so anyway, back to my situation, I like to imagine my school, which was originally called Future Nature, and that's the umbrella corporation of all my other businesses. um, I like to think of that was me planting my tree, and due to everything from mistakes on my part to not being fed proper information at proper times to downright being misled. In the photography business world, oh, people are brutal, and I got taken I got, because I'm a trusting person. And, I never even bothered thinking about things like contracts, with like a photo gig. And you don't think about it until you do 300 hours worth of work and get snow blindness from staring at a computer monitor that you don't get paid for. But that's the wonderful thing about the past is we can learn from it and not repeat those same mistakes. And why we still haven't figured that out after all the time that we've been on this earth is so beyond me. And that's why, just like my father before me, my life's work is to take people, shove them into nature, and nature spits out a human. And once we have a human, we then have something that is unique, has a different view of the world, knows, loves, and respects the earth, is fascinated by what's around every bend in the trail. Um, and in the decades, I've been involved in the nature education movement my whole life. I think I showed this one the other night, but you know, this was the first time I taught a class to a bunch of adults when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. So I've been in this game a long time, and I've been teaching a long time, and it's my life's work, as it was my father's before mine. And I kept wondering, so I started this business, and granted, I started it based on a business model of 10 to 15 adults per weekend. Um, Lo and behold, it didn't work out. So I made a mistake, and that was just the start of it. And since then, I've uprooted my little tree that is my school, my organization, whatever you want to call it, my vision, 3 times or 2 times, and right now it's just been literally within the last week and a half transplanted for the third time. And the only thing I can tell you is that physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, a tree does not have another transplanting in it. I've also encountered some things that have been extremely upsetting to me since my father took his final walk. As you know now, that when I left tracker school in 2009, it was not me quitting because I was, pissed off. It was my father sending me off like a little T3 tracker seed and to spread the original spirit of the tracker school. I remember a time when my dad was the first one up in the morning cooking breakfast for the class, last one to leave the fire at night. Uh, and then as I've said in previous posts, there's a point after so many books had come out, and instead of just people coming and wanting to learn this cool skill set, all of a sudden they started viewing my father as a guru, and that was the last thing he wanted. And it's unfortunate, but he didn't have the tools to deal with it, and it caused him to have to isolate. And so, other than leaving home, leaving the family business, uh, I also made it my personal mission to learn things that I wasn't taught very well as a child, such as emotional intelligence, how to manage money, uh, all those necessary skills. So I left Tracker in 2009 and I went to the Midwest and I started a school called the Primitive Arts Collective. And it was great. In 3 years, I taught classes in 28 different states. Everything from like a postage stamp sized backyard in Brooklyn to, 3,900 acre, uh, old growth birch forest in Vermont, um, and in between. In fact, I think one of the few states I haven't taught in is Hawaii. It's the only state I haven't been to. So if anyone wants to get me a Hawaiian vacation for Christmas next year, let me know. But anyway, I've learned those things. When I left tracker school in 2009, I was an ego-driven man boy. I was T3. I was Tom Brown Jr.'s son. Um, and I rapidly learned that's not a very good way to be, from the place of the ego. And it took a very special person to teach me how to be a human being emotionally. And probably one of the most influential people in my life. So, I got the emotional intelligent part. I obviously have the experience. I moved out here to Oregon after spending 3 years in Virginia attempting to build a nonprofit outdoor education center called Earth Village Education. My former partner and her two friends took a huge farm an hour west of Washington D.C. and it was all like run down and grown over, and over the course of a few years built a state of the art outdoor education center with like 26 different types of alternative agriculture and permaculture. I of course was teaching skills, blacksmithing, everything, and then it just fell apart. The family decided that, oh, we thought we had this old rundown beat up farm, but it actually looks really nice now. And we want to live here. And you're gonna have to cut your programming in half. And it's like as a nonprofit, um, you got to put something out there. You can't just ask and not, do the classes and things we were planning on doing. So long story short, a friend of mine invited me out here to Portland area to work. And I have to say, as somebody who despises business on all levels, my previous job to going out on my own was my dream. I would wake up on Monday morning. There would be a email in my inbox for my weekend classes and my students from the schedule I designed. I would spend the week preparing slowly and fluidly, thoughtfully. Weekend would come, I would run the classes, clean up, and when I wasn't doing that, I was doing land stewardship. And then I decided that, I wanted to go out on my own. And boy, was I not prepared. I thought because I had built up a pretty, loyal following of students in the area that it wasn't going to be, super hard. And keep in mind, this is also like, post COVID as well. So I moved from the cabin I was living in into a small space just up the road, and it was a beautiful 15-acre property. And instead of the business model of 10 to 15 adults, on the weekends, I moved to a more one-on-one model, one-on-one private classes. And before I left there, to go down to California, I had, 5 or 6 people that would come out at least one day, if not one day, sometimes an overnight, every month, and I was like so close to stability. Yeah, even after all the huge hit I had taken. And there was one thing missing though, was I was so desperately craving friendships, like real friendships and community and kinship and being around people that spoke my own language and didn't look at me funny for like smelling a tree or, any of the things us weirdo nature folk do. And I that's why I chose to kind of pick up roots, and I find myself back up here in the Oregon area, replanting my tree. And now I am at the point where I'm doing 99.9% of my teaching online, although I am available to be booked for private in-person sessions as well as online sessions. I'm finally feel like I'm gaining some traction again, and I'm feeling some positivity. But anyway, I want to take a step back. So I was born into this wonderful worldwide global community of the most amazing people on the planet. I mean, some of the most genuine, honest, talented, amazing people ever. And that's why it was such a shock to me when I found out, and continuing to find out, that malicious things were being said about me online. Based on the fact that you know, part of my origin story is the fact that in my past I struggled with addiction. And I never tried to hide that from anybody. I talk about it regularly. So first, I had that weaponized against me, which hurt. And then I've had any other number of things. And then because I was always doing, things that other people were thinking I should have been doing instead of what my heart was telling me. And truthfully, at the time, I wasn't even able to listen to my heart. Because in the last 4 years, I've lost my mom, my dad, my dog of 18 years, the only woman I've ever loved. And I was, a broken thing. And it wasn't until last May when I started having these series of experiences and visions. And it started with the story I tell about the red-winged blackbird landing on a little branch on the pond. And it would go down to take a drink of water and see its reflection, see a rival male, and start fighting the water. And all of a sudden, I was transported into like pitch black space, like in the Matrix or something. And then there's an elder from my childhood standing next to me named Ralph the Little Turtle. And there's also, and he hands me a thing that looks like a steampunk camera lens. And when I put it up to my eye, I couldn't, look into the future is really fuzzy. But as I turned backwards, I could clearly see so many things and how so many choices altered my life in so many ways. And how, sometimes even the most insignificant choice can drastically determine, or alter the course of your life. So, I've learned lessons there. I learned a ton of lessons in Alaska last year. And then just I continually have been getting pummeled with information. And then I make it up here to my friend's house and I start going through my family, history, and find some writings of my father's that really made a lot of things click and me understand a lot of things from a different angle. to the point which I'm able to almost completely revamp the way my classes are, how I teach and what I teach. And the first product of that is the class called the Diamond of Oneness. I am a tool of creation and of nature, and my job is to open my fellow humans' eyes up to the wonderful beauty that is around them all over the place. And I, you know, I made the choice to give my life to that vision years ago, and I will gladly lay my life down for it. And that's all I've ever wanted to do is teach. So I keep going, and I'm just trying, and I'm like wondering like why I just don't understand. I mean, being that I also started with nothing, um and just word of mouth, slowly built things up, and that's how I ended up with private students and private online students. And then back to the conversation my dad and I had when he asked me to leave tracker school because he wasn't happy with how people just only wanted to learn the philosophy stuff anymore, and the skills were, it was weird. It was right around the internet boom. And I can remember we would, when I was a kid, we'd put a winter survival class up, and within 2 or 3 days, there'd be 100 and something people signed up. And then we'd wait a couple of years and run the next one. And then it was like 2006 or something. And then like 30 people signed up. And everybody just wanted philosophy classes. And we get these people who would come and take like 6 philosophy classes in a row, and at the end of the winter they just look like zombies. And I actually, one of the arguments my father and I got in was I proposed a moratorium that people only be allowed to take 2 philosophy classes per year, because the way that information, and even information about the skills, is meant to be doled out is not all at once. It's meant to be doled out in a way to give you the principles of how a skill or a spiritual technique works, and then you apply those principles to whatever environment you're in. And so, here I am chugging along. And one of the last things he said to me is he said, "You're going to have some good times. You're going to have some bad times. You'll probably have some really bad times, but you will reach more people than I ever imagined." And I was 31 at the time. And by that time in his life, he had written, quite a few books. School had been around for a while, and I was like, he's crazy. And then lo and behold, here we are, what, 17, 16 years later. I came up with this idea of the digi natural nomad, which is still very much my vision. And in fact, if my father and son Baron Ralph Little Turtle would let me get a good night's sleep, it would be great. But I'm essentially being, commanded to go spend 2 years driving around the country, collecting interviews for the documentary on my father, the biography I'm writing about him, um, teaching classes from anywhere via Starlink, um, and also staying in certain places for a month or so, and being able to bring the skills to you at a minimal price. Because even before the pay what you will method, which I'll talk about here in a second, uh, I always, charge as little as humanly possible. Because I like to tell people, I'm not really teaching you anything. I'm just helping you to remember. what you know, it's ingrained in your DNA. I'm just making it up. And I was never comfortable when talking about money around classes. I can understand, the logistics side. You got to rent a facility, you got to buy food, all that stuff. But when it came to the actual information, um, you know, I just hated discussing it with people. So that's why a few weeks back, after a couple dreams and being visited by a few ghosts and some things I read. Not only did I come up with this whole concept of the diamond of oneness, but the pay what you will method model popped into my head. Now, with modern online education, I'm sure there are people viewing this from all over the globe, um, which is amazing. It's amazing that we have this. And the internet is such an amazing tool. It contains the length and breadth of the human experience. And yet, what do most people do with the internet? They look at filth, they buy things, or they watch cat videos. They get way more views than my skills videos for some reason. But anyway, when you have a tool literally that you can communicate with anyone instantly around the globe, and you have so much information at your fingertips. And that's when, and consequently, my Uncle Jim is, on the board of the International Online Educators Association. Some more college professor type educators, but he's also given me a lot of advice. And I'm about to take online education even higher with the addition of now I will now have the ability, instead of this, where I'm sitting in a chair talking to you, I will have a flying webcam that will follow me, and you'll be able to hear me perfectly. And I'll get I like shake with excitement when I think all the new stuff I'll be able to do with a tool like that. And just knowing the fact that I've got my Goal Zero battery, I've got my Starlink, I have a 100-foot extension cord and a 175-foot Ethernet cable. So yeah, I can get really far away from the power source and be in the middle of nowhere, 55 miles from the nearest anything, and run a class at full HD where you're literally tracking with me or stalking with me through the woods, and it's like you're there, right there with me. So I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on that new DJI drone, so I can start, um, learning how to use it. Even though I've been a commercial drone pilot for several years, but learning how to integrate my programming, integrate it into my programming. So I got to thinking, uh, one thing that really bothers me, and I said this before, is since my father's passing, I hear and see and get emails about all these things, and there's always meetings going on and discussions about the future of my father's vision, and not once have I been asked to participate. I mean, I've been asked to participate in a few events like that are open to the public, but none of these behind closed doors meetings. And frankly, that alone is hurtful. Not only am I my father's son, not only do I know tracker school like the back of my hand, but I'm also my own man with my own face and 26 years of outdoor education experience. working alone, working for a company where I was teaching around 50 other outdoor educators, and everything in between. Uh, I've always dedicated my life to learning new skills and, learning to act and interact with people and just continually being a student and growing my outdoor educator powers. At a certain point last week, I noticed some things happening, and they were pretty upsetting to me. It's like on one hand, nobody bothers talking to me about my father. I'm out here on the West Coast, and I felt like, the individual strand of dog bane, and there's these piles of dog bane everywhere else that are getting woven into ropes. And I'm like, the one strand that knows the answer to what my father truly wanted to happen with his vision. Um, because he sent me out with it. And I'm willing, ready, willing, and able to pass that along. But another thing that really bothers me is the fact that I have proof that people within my supposed global, worldwide family who claim to, understand a word my father taught, have been actively trying to thwart me and my messages and my class schedules and things online, to the point where my Facebook page has been flagged so many times for things like, posting a class schedule that my reach is nil, and it's growing as I've changed a few things, but it's the thought that anybody, whoever listened to anything my father said, read a word he wrote, would do that to like their worst enemy, much less me. I left tracker school to become all the good parts of my father and learn new skills so that I can have close relationships with my students. And I feel like, I'm being marginalized by people who are seeking to profit in the wrong way. Profit to me is, obviously we all have to make money to live in this world, but the profits that matter to me the most are seeing the sparkle come back into somebody's eyes or watching somebody blow their first Tinder bundle into flames. And I also realize that in my current state, where I'm like just, Humpty Dumpty has just been put back together again and the glue hasn't quite dried. And I'm finally gaining weight back. I was so stoked the other day when my pants wouldn't fit. I had to like suck in. Um, I can't no longer be a part of anything that isn't 100% positive. I can't be a part of any group that seeks to do anything but positively uplift everyone else in the community and in the group and wants to see everybody reach their highest heights. Everybody is, so concerned about, there are so many students out there. Bullshit. Oop, am I allowed to say that? Humans now need nature more than ever, and vice versa. And I can tell you that they're ready. And if those of us that are, legitimate, experienced outdoor educators actually work together instead of, trying to put another organization down, we could perhaps dispel some of the false information that's being spread by these stupid TV shows or by people who love those TV shows and have money and decide that they're going to open up a school after spending a couple nights sleeping around a campfire, and all of a sudden, and they took an $89 online wilderness survival certification. It just boggles my mind. So yeah, I can no longer be around people that don't energize me, that don't challenge me in constructive ways. I don't want to have to, you know, even worry that anybody's saying anything about me because I've never, everybody's done good things, everybody's done bad things. But for the last 16 years of my life, I have truly tried to embody the teachings and live them as best as I possibly could. And, up until one bad decision 4 years ago, I was doing exactly that. I'm an astute journaler, just as my father was. And thankfully, anybody who's ever saw, he used to write in a big red like journal, like a ledger, and I've got this is remarkable. It's basically an Amazon Kindle, but you can write in it, so this thing runs my life. And I've also kept paper journals for years. And when I, add up numbers and statistics, like for instance, I know that after I'm done with this live stream, this will be my 1,900 and, no, wait, yeah, 1,898th hour of online education. I know that I have taught approximately 65 thousand people bow drill. The largest audience I ever spoke in front of was online during COVID. It was 325,000 people. Um, and every time I tell my story about going from being, Mowgli, jungle, running around, and my friends was the land, and then going to suburbia and all the struggles that I went through when I had all of a sudden had this void in me, and I tried to fill it with everything, drugs, money, whatever, and eventually leading me to opiate addiction. And so yeah, so keeping all these things in mind, that I just want positivity. I am not out there to take anybody's students. All I want to do is make sure that people are getting good information. And that's why one of the reasons I move into talking about the whole pay what you will concept. So I hated online teaching at first because I like to move around when I teach. I like to use my hands. And holy crap, the first year was disastrous. Um, but then it grew on me. And I've since developed several multi part awesome presentations. So the classes that are up on my classes page on my schedule now, and the 3 or 4 more I'm going to be adding, which are all starting relatively soon. Um, I may push the start dates back just a little bit because I'm still having a little issue with Squarespace and them letting me know, uh, how many people are in each individual class, because it took me 9 days trying to figure out how to make it so when you click on a class, you are presented with the thing that asks for your name and your email address, and then there's a blank box that says pay what you want. And it's exactly what it is. uh, pay what's within your budget, what you think the class is worth to you. Um, if you're like me, and I couldn't afford any of my classes right now if if I put them up at the retail price. And I doing this because I have this information that has to get out there. And I can't tell you how many times I was paywalled from classes that could have helped me become a better business person. And I might not be in the position I am right now. So I don't want anybody who's just getting into nature or, that sees a class I'm offering that will help dispel a little bit of fear they may have, or even a seasoned instructor who wants to take a class to better their programming. But it's the low season and they don't have any money. I don't want them, paywalled out. The one thing I can promise you, and I did a lot of market research, is when you take one of my online classes, I don't have any one-offs. They're all multiple episodes, 2 hours each episode, and I teach for an hour. After introductions, I give a break, 10 minutes, then I teach for a whole nother hour. I took a couple online classes for market research, and when I added up the time, it was more free time than teaching time. And that you will not get from me. In fact, I regularly go over by half hour or 40 minutes. But yeah, so I'm going to currently, I think there's 4 or 5 classes up. I have 3 more I'm going to be putting up, and then I'm going to be continually, like every month or so, as I ease into it, add more. Um, the other thing is when it comes to my private classes, one-on-one sessions in person or online, those do have a sliding scale. Once again, I want you to pay um, what you're comfortable with. I don't want you to have to do without something else that is important to you to be able to take one of my classes. And I'm also looking for skill trade as well. Part of the reason I've struggled so much is my lack of business skills. And even though I know a billion times more than I did a couple of years ago, I still have a lot to learn. And so, like the whole debacle I went through last week with trying to do the pay what you will system, um, like, so, well, truthfully, my inner vision told me the right way to do it the first night I thought of it, but I thought I better check with Squarespace first, and they told me it wouldn't work, when in fact, it was the way to get it to work. Um, yeah. So I'm going to keep adding to that list. I'm going to be doing more regular free events like this. Some will be just story time, some will be just, skill related. Uh, and all that stuff is going to be based around the Tracolites group and my webpage. So, a couple things. So, my webpage, tracolites.com, is my daily news page. I typically update it every day with a short video or some text on what I'm working on. Um, and, eventually my website is going to evolve into uh, 2 parts. There's going to be one part that's for people who want to have a membership that doesn't cost anything, but it will give you access to things like gear that I recommend and organizations I trust, so that the front part of my page isn't too bogged down, um, things to click on. And originally that was my plan for tracklights.com, was you had to create an account to see anything. and I decided to do away with that for a little bit. Um, but yeah, the and thanks to my friend Scott, um, he was like, you should start a tracholites group, and I'm like, well, I have one, and he's like, no, you don't. So lo and behold, once again, oh yeah, so this is a funny one. I took a business quiz the other night on like the efficiency of your business, and I plugged in all this data, and according to this thing, I should have two full-time employees and one part-time employee. So that's me. Um, so I have my Thomas Hockey Brown the third, which because it's a verified page, they make you use your full legal name. That was not my choice, and I'm trying to get them to change that. I have a Tracolites business page, but the group is meant for the group to interact. So I'll regularly be posting videos and things like that to there. You're welcome to do the same. Um, and I also, my YouTube, I have this new T3 Learn series, which are going to be just like short little classes that are a few episodes long, maybe 5-10 minutes each episode, just to get the information out there. Because that's another negative thing about all of these shows is people are dying because they are being fed bad information because the instructor is not experienced. And I want to try to keep that from happening. And I just know that faith is the most powerful force on earth. And for once, in a long time, I actually have some faith. And I also, need you all to understand that because of everything from, my Lyme, which doesn't necessarily, affect me every single day. It's the fact that, 4 years ago, my physician told me I needed 60 days of uninterrupted rest for my body chemistry to normalize after the previous year of working a full-time job and then coming home at night and working till 4 in the morning, uh, building future nature. Yeah, really did me in. And then I have a heart condition I was born with, and Lyme messes with that, so it's no fun. Um, but yeah, physically, people are like, go get a part time job. And I'm like, I couldn't right now if I wanted to. I'm just now starting to feel strong enough to where, I can be up and moving all day. And I'm so ashamed that I put self care last for so many years. And that's the beautiful part about whoever's crafting this narrative is it perfectly feeds into the whole drug thing and the whole this and that, and I have a chronic illness. Weight loss is a common factor. Also doing things like not eating till 9 or 10 o'clock at night for 3 years will cause you to lose a bit of weight. Uh, but yeah, I decided in May after that first vision I had to change things. And those of you who've been following along have seen those changes. And unfortunately, right now, I'm the only one that I can count on, to get out of my current station in life and to get the proper vehicle so that I can be a little mobile contained unit. Um, I thought I was going to be able to make it work in the Subaru. And maybe if I was just going around to go hiking a bunch of different places, it would work. But when you need to carry around a bunch of raw materials and photography stuff and camera monitors, or God, computer monitors, it's just, you know, I tried. Um, so yeah, so I'm feeling positive. I've got, positive role models and people helping me out, and I'm starting to dig out of the pit. And a big part of that, is this new Tracholites group. It's open to everybody and anybody. Um, I love everybody, even those that, seek to do me wrong, because it just, what they say, if people aren't hating on you, then you're not doing something right. So I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing, and if you want to hang out with me and check out what I'm doing, you will have pretty much unfettered access, because once I do get my plans fully up and rolling, like the ideas I have in here are game changers, and I just need the fuel to get the fire started, so to speak. But I plan on uh, taking nature education to its highest level possible, um, and seek out undernatured people, places, and things, and help to, you know, renature them by plugging them back into the nature net. So yeah, once I hit end, a slide will pop up with the address to the group. You can also find it on my personal Facebook page. And yeah, so I'm also looking for help as far as, the business skills, especially around marketing, social media, all that stuff. I'm the social media thing. I mean, they change it so much that the people that do that for a living don't even know anymore. So yeah, so I'm here. I'm going to be teaching, and you're welcome to join, whether you put nothing in that box or $1 million, please. Uh, I just want to teach. And when I'm teaching, I'm happy. And when I'm happy, I'm much more productive. And I've had enough of 3.5 years of waking up in a constant, like instantly in adrenaline terror phase. Like, I just, it's not me. It's not who I am. It's not where I'm supposed to be at this point in my life. So once I finally realized that, the only person you can really count on is yourself, um, it caused me to shift my outlook yet again and see it through a new set of eyes. Learn something new every day. It's one of my main rules. So therefore, Tracholites, unite, help me, help the world, because I had that GoFundMe for a while, and the other day I went on there to shut it down, and I watched these guys have this thing. It was a magnet that you could connect your phone to so you could watch TV, connect it to the fridge. They were looking for $150,000, and they raised $1.3 million in a week and a half. My GoFundMe's been up for 4 years, and it's raised $20,000. And I'm offering true freedom if you practice the skills I teach, and a pathway to a better life through a deeper connection to the natural world. But it seems that plastic junk that ends up in a dumpster is more important than that to people these days. So I need help changing minds, and I hope you'll join me. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This was kind of a spur of the moment thing, and you know, we're going to change the world for the better and bring about the age of the caretaker. Peace, love, joy, and purpose to you all. Thank you. Anytime you have a question about anything, you hear rumor, call me like an adult and talk to me. That's all you got to do. Anyway, I love you all. And happy spring. And you ain't seen nothing yet. So hang tight. Peace.